As you grow older, many envision their golden years surrounded by family, especially the idea of living close to your children. The image of being close to your grandchildren, sharing laughter-filled mornings, and being part of their everyday lives might seem like the ideal situation. But could this well-intentioned decision be affecting your happiness and mental well-being more than you imagine? In this eye-opening exploration, we'll dive into why living close to or with your children in old age can sometimes become a double-edged sword. While the closeness can foster a sense of purpose, it may also unintentionally create emotional burdens, making you feel confined and ultimately less fulfilled. Let's explore a fresh perspective and uncover how rethinking your situation could transform your quality of life. Before we begin, I want you to listen carefully to this new and compelling story because it offers valuable lessons that might just shift how you view your later years. Mrs. Rosa, a 70-year-old widow, made a decision that many in her position would have considered ideal. After her husband's passing, she chose to move in with her daughter Lucia, believing that being close to family, especially her grandchildren, would provide her with comfort and a renewed sense of purpose. Who wouldn't want to be surrounded by loved ones during such a vulnerable stage of life? Initially, Mrs. Rosa's days were filled with joy. There was the laughter of children in the house, the smells of home-cooked meals, and the simple pleasure of feeling needed. She had become part of an intergenerational household, something many studies, including recent research from Stanford University, suggest can boost happiness and provide a strong sense of purpose for older adults. Yet, over time, the utopian dream began to show cracks. Mrs. Rosa noticed that her free time had slowly disappeared. Her days now revolved around cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. Every moment seemed occupied, and those quiet moments she once cherished, where she could simply sit with a book or reflect on her life, vanished. One evening, while preparing dinner, Mrs. Rosa overheard a conversation between her daughter and a friend. "Mom is a blessing. I don't know what we'd do without her." Initially, Rosa felt a surge of pride, but as the days went by, a subtle feeling began to creep in, a sense of unease she couldn't quite define. Was it guilt? Was it frustration? Something had changed. Philosopher Epicurus once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." These words now echoed in Rosa's mind. Her once vibrant life, filled with personal hobbies and passions, now felt consumed by the routines of family life. She missed the solitude of her old apartment and the freedom to decide how to spend her time. At 70, Rosa was starting to question the balance she had created between family obligations and personal autonomy. The joy of being surrounded by loved ones had started to transform into something she hadn't anticipated, a loss of her identity. What Mrs. Rosa was experiencing is far more common than you might think. In fact, a growing body of research highlights the challenges that arise from older adults becoming primary caregivers for their grandchildren. There's even a term for it, grandparent burnout, or more formally, the grandmother slave syndrome, a phrase coined by sociologist Dr. Antonio Guaro. This phenomenon is characterized by the physical and emotional burden placed on older adults, particularly women, who assume an unpaid caregiver role. While the idea of helping raise grandchildren sounds fulfilling, over time it can lead to fatigue, isolation, and even depression. Studies have shown that caregiving grandparents often experience chronic stress, reduced socialization, and declining physical health. Ironically, the more they give to their family, the less they often have to give to themselves. In Mrs. Rosa's case, her responsibilities had slowly escalated. What began as occasional babysitting turned into a full-time commitment, Her mornings were filled with making breakfast, her afternoons spent helping with homework, and her evenings were dedicated to ensuring everything was in place for the next day. The tipping point came when she found herself longing for small moments of independence. One Sunday morning, as she prepared pancakes for her grandchildren, she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd indulged in her hobbies, or even had an afternoon to herself. The guilt of wanting time alone clashed with the expectation of being the ever-present grandmother. Psychologist Erikson spoke about the critical importance of autonomy in older age. His theories suggest that a loss of independence in later life can lead to what he called stagnation, where individuals feel trapped in routines, unable to grow or experience personal fulfillment. Mrs. Rosa's sense of self was slowly being eroded. While she loved her family, she found herself questioning, was this truly what she wanted for the remainder of her life? The philosopher Seneca said, "Life is long if you know how to use it." Mrs. Rosa realized that she hadn't been using her time to nourish her own soul. Instead, she was fulfilling the needs of others. Everything began to shift when an old friend, Carmela, came to visit one afternoon. Carmela, always known for her sharp wit and insight, immediately noticed that Mrs. Rosa wasn't herself. Her once vibrant friend now appeared tired and burdened. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, Carmela asked, "Rosa, why do you look so drained? What happened to the woman who loved to travel and paint, the one who dreamed of trying new things?" Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed. "I love my family, but I've lost myself. I'm just grandma now." Carmela smiled. "That's how I felt too, until I made a radical decision." She went on to share how, after facing a similar situation, she chose to move out of her son's home and regain her independence. "At first, everyone thought I was crazy. 'You'll be so lonely,' they said. But what they didn't realize was that I had never felt more alone than when I was constantly surrounded by people who expected things from me." Carmela's decision to live on her own was transformative. She regained her sense of autonomy, started attending art classes, made new friends, and found a new rhythm in life. "Living alone didn't isolate me from my family," she explained. "It actually strengthened our bond. We now cherish the time we spend together because it's a choice, not an obligation." Carmela's words resonated deeply with Mrs. Rosa. It wasn't about severing ties with her family. It was about creating healthy boundaries and reclaiming her personal space. This new approach to living, called interdependence, recognizes the need for personal autonomy while maintaining strong, supportive relationships with loved ones. Modern psychology emphasizes this balance. Harvard studies have shown that older adults who maintain both independence and connection report higher life satisfaction and lower rates of depression. Independence isn't about isolation. It's about choosing when and how to engage with your family on your terms. Inspired by her friend's wisdom, Mrs. Rosa decided to have an important conversation with her daughter, Lucia. Sitting together on the porch, she expressed her desire to regain some independence, to move into her own space where she could rediscover her passions. "I love being here with you," Rosa explained, "but I need some time for myself. I want to get back into painting, maybe take some classes again. I think I'll be a better grandmother if I have more time for myself." Lucia was understandably surprised, but ultimately supportive. "Mom, I had no idea you felt this way," she admitted. "Of course I'll miss having you here, but I want you to be happy." With her family's blessing, Mrs. Rosa moved into her own apartment, just a short distance away from her daughter's home. It was a small place, but it was hers. She filled it with colorful decorations, dusted off her old easel, and began to reimagine her life. Slowly but surely, she reconnected with the woman she had been before caregiving took over. The effects of Mrs. Rosa's decision were almost immediate. She felt revitalized. She joined a local art group, made new friends, and even began mentoring other seniors who were struggling with similar issues of autonomy. Every week, she set aside dedicated time to visit her grandchildren, but now these moments were filled with joy, not obligation. Her relationship with her daughter also improved. With space to breathe, they no longer clashed over daily routines. Instead, they cherished their time together, which became more meaningful and enjoyable for everyone involved. A growing number of studies support Mrs. Rosa's experience. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology shows that older adults who maintain their independence are more likely to experience better physical health, greater mental clarity, and increased happiness. Additionally, those who balance family involvement with personal freedom tend to have stronger, more satisfying relationships with their children and grandchildren. Mrs. Rosa's story serves as a powerful reminder that even in old age, we should never stop striving for balance and autonomy. Living close to or with your children may seem like the natural choice, but it's essential to assess how it impacts your mental health, well-being, and sense of self. Interdependence, rather than dependence, fosters healthier, more fulfilling relationships for everyone involved. As you reflect on your own life or the lives of your loved ones, consider the value of personal space, hobbies, and independence.